Hey there, welcome to Rise Up with Genina Chan. I'm Genina, host and content creator, always curious to learn more from life. This podcast is one for the mind, heart, body, and soul as we share stories from real lives that draw inspiration, provide strength, and empower each other to rise up.
And I realized after that, okay, if politics is a game that leaders play, I need to learn the rules so that one day the people can win.
As soon as your body adapts, as soon as your body builds a system of habits, it'll get much easier. And the days where you don't feel like doing it, it actually becomes automatic. That's one thing that I've learned.
Hi there, I'm Mish, host of Misconceptions, the podcast that talks about the common struggles of modern-day millennials and Gen Zs as we all navigate through college, enter the real world, and build our careers.
Really something that we have to face, and I think that's where growth comes from.
Yes.
If you start, because you start to question yourself, and then you start to know yourself more, diba?
Don't forget to give time for yourself, kasi that's really the most important thing that you as a person have to.
Ito, I know it's easier said than done, but kailangan natin matutunan how to protect our rest and recovery practices intensely.
Welcome to Daddy Academy, the DIY podcast for dads. This podcast is for longtime dads, working dads, soon-to-be dads, and all the kind of dads who are just eager to hear about each other's stories, learn from each other, and relate to one another.
I think the most memorable struggle that I had was marrying my wife because not the way you think.
Pagkatuhin mo yung sentence niya kasi
Yes.
So I was literally teacher, nanny, entertainer, everything you can think of. Everything basically what a mom does. Diba? I was mom.
A pleasant afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How is everybody doing? I hope you're all doing great and safe at the comfort of your home. My name is Mary Grace Koo, and I'll be your host for this afternoon's session. And I'm from, of course, the premier Chinese-Filipino lifestyle show, Chinoy TV, 废话电视台. You are watching the power of our voice, making a choice on the road less traveled. That is a webinar series where we explore different ways to use our voices in the traditional and non-traditional media and the opportunities it's presented to Chinoys in hosting. Presented by the Chinoy Podcast Network and Chinoy TV in partnership with NBTIN, Geneto PH, Canva, Fruits in Bloom, Alliance of Filipino Chinese Students, Ateneo Celadon, De La Salle University Management of Financial Institutions Association, Rotary Club of Chinatown, Manila, St. Jude Catholic School Student Council, University of Santo Tomas Scarlett Central, and University of Santo Tomas Scarlett Accountancy. Well, thank you so much to our sponsors for making this event possible. And I'm so grateful to see all the attendees that's joining us this afternoon for the second part of our series. How are you guys? If you have any thoughts, feel free to send in a message or a shout out on the chat box, okay? And in the first part, that happened last September 9, we talk about finding our voice on TV events. And for today, we will be talking about finding our voice for radio and VO. Wow, I'm sure you guys are so excited. Oh, not only that, we also have our podcast. I'm sure you guys are so excited for today's session. But during the first series, we already have seen how we have celebrated #OneChinoy campaign, where it aims to highlight the modern Chinoy who embraces the tradition and adapts to the changes in these modern times. Throughout the past few months, Chinoy TV has launched New Face, the new website, the new perspective, which Mitch is a Chinese by blood, Filipino by heart. We all definitely agree with that, right? And there is this new documentary, New Voice. This aims to provide a platform where stories can be heard and, of course, the importance of our voice. We'll hear more from our panel today. Are you guys excited and ready to meet our speakers for today? Can I hear some chats from you guys? All right, but let me just remind everybody that today is going to be about podcasting, voiceover, and also radio. So if you are interested to go into this platform, then be sure to stick around with us up till the very end of our program. All right, so I think, wow, hi, Pep. Yes, thank you for that first chat here. Excited, and hello, everybody. Yes, welcome to our session today. So I would love to introduce you our speakers for today. First up, a continuity announcer of ETC and a commercial voiceover talent, a podcaster since 2014, and hosts the Wrestling podcast. On deck with Stanley Chi, and now streaming a Chinoy podcast. When he's not performing on mic, you can find him hosting for TV and events as well, writing about sports and pop culture, or geeking out over strategy in reality TV shows like Survivor. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me as we welcome our first speaker for today, Stanley.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Mary Grace. Good to see you again. Great to be part of this event. Thank you to Chinoy TV and all the organizers for letting me be a part of this.
Let's do this! Stan, nice to see you too. Actually, medyo matagal na. I know when the last time I saw you in person, but today definitely will be something very interesting for everyone. So next up, let me introduce you our next speaker for today. No stranger to utilizing his voice to inspire, engage, and persuade others of our reality. If you haven't heard him, he is a voice actor and the voice of Cinema One. It doesn't end there. Currently, he is more involved in helping out novice voice actors finding their route or their success in the industry. And we have from the VOC Alliance community. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Sir Zahn Yu.
Hello, magandang hapon po. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I apologize if I can't greet you in Chinese. My humble apologies. But good afternoon, nonetheless. I'm very humbled to be here, and it is an awesome privilege to be joining you today, and looking forward to great discussions this afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Hello, Sir Zahn. It's my first time to actually encounter or have this encounter with you. But earlier, before we actually went live, I was saying, grabe si Sir Zahn, yung kanyang boses, normal speaking voice sounds like so modulated.
You are too kind. You are too kind. It is a pleasure to be able to speak with you, Mary Grace. Yeah, to meet you as well.
Yes, thank you for that. But we are not yet over. We still have two more that's joining us today. So next up, a modern journalist of Phil Coche on YouTube, host of Feelings on 1PH and Radio 5 92.3 New FM. He is also the author of 12 humor books and a cartoonist of Manila Bulletin. Ang banda, dami niyang kayang gawin, ha? He also hosts his podcast entitled Underpaid with Stanley Chi, which is one of the top Pinoy business podcasts in the country, which tackles the reality of corporate world. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me as we welcome Mr. Stanley Chi.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, MG. Hi, Stan. Hello, Sir Zahn. I'm excited to share all our learnings sa ginagawa namin, whether it's in podcasting, radio, VO. Yan. So thank you for attending, and thank you Chinoy TV for inviting us.
Yes, nako, for sure, marami po kayong share no, sa lahat ng ating mga viewers for today. But to round up today's speakers, ladies and gentlemen, we have our Managing Director of Chinoy Podcast Network and also the host of her own podcast, Mish Conceptions, our very own Mish Tan.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. It's such an honor to be part of this panel, given that lahat sobrang galing and nahiya ako dun sa boses ko. I was talking to both Stan and Stanley Chi separately before that. Sabi ko, there's still a lot to improve and there's still a lot to learn. But I'm very happy that everyone's here to learn like us.
Welcome, welcome. And even I myself, I'm so happy to have this opportunity to be on the same screen with all of you. And I believe it's now time for us to get started with our discussion. So for the first one, we will be talking about topic number one is beginnings. Kumbaga, how you guys started, the evolution in podcasting, in radio and voiceover. And to everybody that's watching, thank you for those messages that's coming in sa ating chat box. If you have any questions, maaari rin po kayong magtanong and we'll try to pick some questions from our audience later on if we have enough time. But of course, speaking of our very own Mish Tan, Mish, for you, ang ating first question, no, we wanted to start off since you already have shared about the campaign in the first session or the leg one of our event. Why voice and why is it very important? And of course, maybe you can share with us why also podcasting and what are the inspiration for you to really went into podcasting and have misconceptions?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I guess I'll start with voice. Yeah, you're right. For those who attended the first part of the webinar, we gave, a brief overview of the whole campaign. Really what we want to focus on is, our voice has always been there. It's a gift for us, but we haven't really paid attention to it for some. And there are times that it's very underrated or very, unappreciated. So our voice can do a lot of things, right? It could, you could feel, you can know the feelings of that person through their voice, how they projected their voice, how they were able to, I guess, convey their message through their voice. There's a lot of things that you could get from it. You could support others through your voice. You could advocate for freedom or advocate for anything through your voice. There's really, really a lot, and the list goes on. That's why I really think voice is it's very important for us to use it. And it's one thing people can't take away from us. It's one thing that, we need to keep using more. And obviously there are a lot of mediums where we could use it. And in terms of podcasting, I know the first part was more on TV and video. For this one is really something close to my heart because I myself is actually a new podcaster as well. Like I just started this year, and everyone here in the panel has been, in the industry for quite some time. So it's really, a humbling experience to be here to learn from them. And actually, Stanley Chi's podcast is one of my favorite podcasts. Before, I keep telling him this because I'm very much into corporate, corporate life, and just relating too much, a lot about the experiences there. So I have been a podcast listener for 4 years now, and it didn't really hit me to start my own until like the pandemic, when this whole thing happened. There's a lot to talk about, and for me it's all about adulting in career because that's what's close to me. That's what I experience, and I feel like there's a lot to talk about in those two topics, and those are the two topics I could openly and genuinely talk about. Yung hindi ko pinipilit, kumbaga. The other question, I think, on, how is it like, to handle different podcasts? I think that relates to the podcast network as well, because we don't normally handle one podcast, which is my own podcast. I also, the team also handles different podcasts and produces the podcast, like for Rise Up with Genina Chan or Daddy, everything you've seen there in the loop. It's really different because, like what I mentioned earlier, when you're handling your own podcast, that's something close to you. You already know that that's the topic you want to talk about, but handling a different podcast that's not yours, just trying to think of topics about it, just trying to like adapt to that target market of that particular podcast is totally different. So yeah, I mean, very different experience and yet exciting for me as well.
Yes, parang gusto ko na ring mag-podcast, no? But I really don't have any, but I don't have any idea about podcasting. But it just make me feel na kapag nakikinig ka sa isang podcast, because I am a listener, but I never tried really doing one. Pero siguro after nito, no, pwede tayo mag-kickstart with that. But more questions to talk about. Maybe I can go to Stan C. We have two Stanley and Stan, but I go first for Stan. You have been doing radio for many years now. What pushed you to explore this route, especially in the Chinoy community? Hindi siya normal, kumbaga. Kumbaga, it's a different track that not a lot of us would take. And you have 3 podcasts. Oh my God. why these three podcasts and paano sila nagiging relevant or similar to your persona, principles, and beliefs?
Start muna tayo dun sa paano ako nakapasok sa podcasting. So, yung training ko talaga is in radio. So, I started in 2010. And as early as 2012, nung wala pang masyadong podcasts dito sa Pinas, my dad was already pushing me to start a podcast. And as early as then, I was already very vocal about yung mga fandoms ko. So particularly wrestling, as in yung WWE type of pro wrestling, and basketball. So I used to write about it on just my little blogs, and I could talk kasi nga I was on the radio. So sabi ng dad ko, why don't you try podcasting? Which is really funny because in retrospect, neither my dad nor I were frequently listening to podcasts. Like we just knew they existed, but we weren't really checking them out because again, there was really a market for that here sa Philippines. So I sat on that idea. I didn't do anything about it. And then in 2014, I was going through a breakup. And then after a night at the bar with my friends, I called up yung isang college classmate ko who I was frequently writing with. Sabi ko, tara, let's record a sample podcast. And it was going to be about wrestling because we're really into wrestling. So I drove away from the bar and I went to the radio station I used to work at. And I brought my friend with me. We went inside the production booth and we just recorded our thoughts on a show that we had seen like 2 hours prior. Okay. So nag-ramble lang kami. For me, it was a bit of a drunken ramble. And then I don't know where that is now, but it eventually led to what is now called the Wrestling Podcast, which I've been hosting and producing for the last 7.5 years, almost 440 episodes at this point. And dun siya talaga nagsimula yung love ko for the medium, because coming from radio where everything is so structured, you're so limited by time, you're so limited by things na kailangan pag-usapan kasi binayaran ng advertisers or yung branding ng stasyon. I can just talk about things that I want to talk about, and I can do it freely. And I can build a community of people who like the same things that I like. So I was going through the attendees. One of them is actually one of our listeners on the Wrestling podcast. Shout out to Bruce, who's in the audience this afternoon. What's up, man? So from there, you get to build a community, and it's really fun kasi now na we're stuck at home gawa ng pandemic, yung Wrestling podcast, we have weekly live streams where people really gather and they watch and they comment about the wrestling that we got to watch throughout the week. And it's our little watering hole. It's our little safe space where we just get to hang out as friends. Kasi nga, it's the next best thing because we're all stuck at home, right? So, yun, dun nag-start. And then I have a couple of other podcasts that I started working on gawa ng pandemic. So the second one is, as Mary Grace mentioned, yung On Deck with Stanley. It's my love letter to the radio industry, where I just talk to people who have been in the radio business, and I just try to unmask them. Like, sino ka ba? Beyond yung persona mo sa radyo. Sino ka? Sino ka as a person? Why do you love storytelling? And over the course of 2.5 seasons of producing it, sabi ko, parang ang fun if I try to expand a bit. So now it's really just human interest stories. Like my most recent episode is with Pia Ranada of Rappler, who is most known for covering Malacanang. And journalists, diba, they're used to just telling the story as it is, facts only. Pero tao din sila. So I wanted to get into that. Like, ano yung emotions whenever you're being catcalled and wolf whistled in Malacanang of all places, right? These are stories I want to tell. So there's that. And then finally, there's now steaming a Chinoy podcast. And it's something close to my heart bilang Chinoy ako. And, all of us in the panel are Chinoy. And it's me and my co-hosts, Kimberly Mas and Cedric Cheng of So Asian Comics, unpacking yung issues namin being third generation Chinoys. Diba? Like, parang, ano ba ako? Am I not Filipino enough? Am I not Chinese enough? All of that stuff. Just really trying to unpack yung mga tinuro sa atin ng mga parents natin. Like yung Great Wall na yan, tama ba yan? Stupid ba yan? Ako, for me, it's stupid. And I say that on the podcast. So yun, it's a great avenue, great platform to share your views, share your opinions, and start conversations, start discourse. Kasi doon nagsisimula lahat eh. Like kung gusto natin ng pagbabago, dapat magsimula sa, sa conversation, sa communication. And that's what podcasts can bring.
It's really nice to see that nowadays we are more open, I would say. Unlike before, syempre, when you say Chinoy, the track that you really would go to is, let's say, business, something about mathematics, I don't know, being in a accountancy route, But now we see a lot of Chinoys excelling in different fields, especially with you guys in radio, podcast, and voiceover. And speaking of voiceover, thank you so much, Stan, for that. This time around, syempre si Sir Zahn naman yung gusto kong matanong, no? Sir Zahn, how does
Yes.
one become a voiceover artist? Siguro, how did you also start it? Especially you have been doing this, you have said earlier, half of your life na, no? And
Mhm.
being the voice of Cinema One, paano rin itong nangyari? Maybe you can give us a brief about how you started and your journey to it.
Oh, okay. So how much time do we have here? We're gonna be here a while because that's my hint as to how old I actually am. Hopefully, it doesn't show, but let's see. Let me start off by saying there is no one track or one route sa pagiging voiceover. I mean, everyone will have a different story, a different way, a different path, so to speak, a different fork in the road that they encountered in their life. And mine was started in, well, I think safe to say. Let me briefly say that it started as early as high school when I discovered that I could do something with my voice when I was invited to be a lector in church. I'm sure quite a few people have started that way as well, discovering how they can actually use their voice. In this case, in the service of the church. And then I didn't do much. I started doing a little hosting back in high school as well for the school events. Didn't do much of it in college. And although DJing was something I'd always been very interested in, and it came my way a long time ago when I was in between schools and transferring schools in college. And there was an ad for me that I heard on my way home, a radio ad. The local radio station from my hometown in Angeles City was looking for DJs, and I auditioned, and that's where it all started. And that's how I learned and how to use my voice. And when you're a kid, you think of yourself as superhuman, that you've got superpowers, and that you'll live forever, and that you're all that, and that you think you're this big thing. And that's where I quickly learned that I needed to be humbled. I needed to be taken down several notches, that you know nothing. And I learned many great lessons from my mentors in the first radio station I worked for. And that's how I learned how to use my voice. And then about 3-4 years later, I got my first commercial voiceover job. And that's where I learned that everything I learned in radio, I could not even really apply to my work in working in voiceover, because the rules were different. And then along the way, as I kept doing all these voiceover jobs, well, it's for me, as I mentioned, that we all may have different paths. All voice talents, voice actors have different paths, and mine simply came from networking, meaning someone knew someone who knew me. And they said they were looking for referrals, and they were looking for. This was a long time ago. This was before, and just to betray my age a little more, this was before the internet. This was before digital technology. We were recording onto analog. We were recording on analog tape. I would watch recording engineers splice cut up tape after the recording session, put it together on these big open reels, and then give it to their client. And unlike now, you zip everything down to an MP3 and just hit send on email, and just after you hit record on your computer. And so that's how it started for me. It's just one referral after another. And like I mentioned, when I was asked what exactly is a way you would describe your path, and for me, it's just been a series of fortunate events, as I like to put it. I mean, like I mentioned to Mary Grace before we started, that I've been blessed to have this voice, but what I've done with it is, I think, part of the path that I've taken, learning all the learning, all the experience that I've had, and all the things that people have been able to teach me and still continue to teach me. And I like to pride myself in that I'm always open to learning something new every day. And specifically with my voice work in Cinema One. Cinema One is actually the third channel that I've done, that I've been privileged to be the voice of, so to speak. There was my initial referral into becoming a voice for a particular channel was, I'm not sure if it's still on the air. There's it's what used to be called RJTV 29. I'm not sure if anybody remembers or even watched it. And then after that, another referral came along when an opening popped up for the Sky Cable network. Sky Cable had needed voiceovers, and I was referred by another voiceover, as well as he was on his way out at the time because he was migrating, and I was referred, and I didn't even. And the funny thing is, some of these people you don't even know personally. Like you get calls out of the blue going, okay, hi, hello, you were referred to by, and sometimes it's someone you don't even know. They know of you and they got your number along the way. So it came about through networking. And then after Sky Cable led to me being invited to continue my work for when Cinema One started a long time ago, back in 2001. So yeah, so we celebrate happily. We celebrate 20 years.
20. Oh yeah,
this year.
2001. Yeah.
Yeah, 20 years already.
Wow.
So I wouldn't be surprised if some of our participants today our attendees weren't even born yet.
Uy, sir, napanood ko naman yung Cinema One. I watched that growing up.
Thank you. I'm glad somebody's watching and listening.
But
that's how I got into it.
It's really great to see that at your state, Sir Zahn, of being so experienced about doing what you have done, you're still into learning, that quote unquote learning, and you still help people through Vogue Alliance. Siguro later we can talk more about that.
Yes.
But thank you for giving us a brief about
Absolutely.
what you do. Ngayon naman, let's go to Sir Stanley. Ito, Sir Stanley, being in the radio as a radio host for Radio 5 92.3 Radio FM. How about for you? How did you start it? Did you audition for it? And also being a journalist in Manila Bulletin, paano mo na-juggle lahat, and paano mo na pagsama up till now what you are doing? You have a TV show, you have a podcast. So you want to share with us?
Kasi hindi ako lumalabas ng bahay, kaya nagagawa ko lahat yun.
Yung pala yung sikreto doon.
I stay at home. I stay at home. Tapos lumalabas na ako pag may shoot. So kung pag required lang ako lumabas, saka ako lalabas. So instead of watching Netflix, hindi naman masamang manood ng Netflix, no? I myself watch a couple of TV programs sa Netflix. Pero syempre, I make myself productive. Kasi mas marami kang magagawa pagka nakafocus ka dun sa goals mo. And one of my goals is to be a good host. And kung hindi ka nag-host, paano ka magiging magaling na host? Diba? So dapat ginagawa mo palagi yan. And dyan pumasok yung pagpa-podcast. The podcasting was before the pandemic, 2019 yata. I guested sa show nila Stanley, and then I was asking them, uy, okay tong podcast network ninyo. I want to join sana. Paano ba mag-ano ng podcast? And then pinakilala nila ako sa Podcast Network Asia. And then, ayun.
Wala bang pala ng referral dyan?
Oo nga eh. Yung ano ko nga eh, yung Lazada referral ko nga, nasa iyo eh. Yung ano eh, pagka kumukuha sila sa akin sa Podmetrics, sa iyo talaga napupunta yun.
Tama yun.
Oh, di ba? Pero I already have the concept.
Parang MLM lang, no?
Oo. The concept, naisip ko na, ito gagawin ko. Ito yung hindi ginagawa ng mga ibang podcast, yung mga... kasi when I started the podcast, I don't want it to be a show that talks about anything and everything under the sun. Kasi ang dami ng ganung podcast, ang dami ng what makes you different. Kung yari yung mga artista na maraming followers gumawa ng podcast, tapos sila rin gagawin nila, we talk about anything and everything under the sun. Di nawalan ka na ng listeners mo, di ba? So make your show unique, na ikaw lang yung gumagawa. Di ba? Sa mga Chinoy, makaka-relate kayo. Kukwento ko sa inyo isang story. Siguro naman kilala niyo si Jackie Chan, di ba? Nakita niyo sumasayaw sa Shopee, di ba? Si MG na ghost niyan eh. Introduce, di ba? Si Jackie Chan, ang tingin niya sa sarili niya, action star. You saw naman kung ano yung itsura ni Jackie Chan, di ba? He looks like a comedian na nagkakarate. Yung time na nun, yung time na bilang action star, ang kalaban niya, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, sino ba yung mga action star dati, Sir Zahn? Sila Chuck Norris, yung mga mukhang action star talaga, unang tingin pa lang. So ang ginawa ni Jackie Chan, nagdagdag siya ng ibang element sa movies niya. Nag-action comedy, nagpapatawa siya, kumakanta siya, sumasayaw. So naglagay siya ng ibang element, hindi niya tinapatan yung mga contemporaries niya. Ganun yung ginawa ko sa podcast ko. Kasi yung mga nasa business podcast, puro serious sila lahat eh. Parang naka-Amerikana lahat, puro English lahat. Tapos pro-management sila. Iniisip ko, paano kunyari yung boss mo may problema? Paano kung yung manager mo yung masama ugali? So dapat meron kang concept na that caters to the employees. That caters to the yung mga immortal, yun yung tawag ko sa kanila. So yun, pinresent ko yung concept dun sa podcast network, and then I came up with the word na yung pag sinabi mo yung word na yun, alam nila pang trabaho. So ginawa ko relatable sa lahat, and lahat ng empleyado, ang tingin nila sa sarili nila, kahit malaki sweldo nila, underpaid sila. 'Di ba? So una pa lang alam mo na tungkol sa trabaho.
Ang catchy nun eh. Yun yung unang
Nakarelate.
underpaid.
Yes.
Underpaid, 'di ba? Si MG, kahit gaano nakalaki ang TF niya, iniisip niya underpaid siya. 'Di ba? Si Stanley, sa laki ng kinikita niya sa radyo tsaka sa mga nakukuha niya sa mga affiliate links ng Lazada tsaka Shopee, iniisip ni Stanley, underpaid rin siya.
Sobrang laki ng kinikita sa radyo, pang gasolina lang.
Yes. Si Mish, kahit na bossing yan sa opisina, iniisip ni Mish, underpaid siya. Lalo naman si Sir Zahn, siya yung bosses ng Cinema One. Di ba? Pag ikaw yung bosses ng Cinema One, hindi ka pwedeng mawala dun sa network. Kasi maninibago mga viewers. So kahit na napakalaki ng sweldo nila, iniisip nila underpaid sila. So yun.
Sabihin mo ngayon sa boss ko para hingi ako ng increase.
Sabihin mo kay boss mo ano ba yan? Pinipirata ako ng joke lang.
But yes, thank you. Yes, Sir Zahn. Please.
Yun, I talk about topics na na nakaka-relate yung mga empleyado. Yun yung sa podcast ko. And hindi ito ginagawa ng mga typical na Chinese, lalo na nung nag-start ako. Si Stan kasi mas bata, so at least nung nag-start siya, medyo accepted na kahit papaano. Si Mish, mas bata pa sa amin ni Stan, so kahit papaano, di ba? Nung kami si Sir Zahn, mas mahirap pa yung journey niya nung dati. Yung sa akin, nung time na yon, mahirap din kasi when you talk about hosting, wala namang seminar or school para tuturuan ka paano maging host. Wala namang magtuturo sa'yo paano maging magaling na DJ, paano magpatawa, wala namang ganun eh. And pag nalaman ng mga parents natin yan, ang tatanong sa inyo, magkano kita dyan, magkano sweldo dyan? And pag nalaman nila na wala kang kikitain, or kung kikitain mo yung maliit lang, they will discourage you. And you can't blame them kasi nung generation nila, mahirap kumita ng pera. Diba? Nung mga older generation, kailangan makagraduate ka para magkaroon ka ng magandang trabaho or magtatayo ka ng sarili mong negosyo. Ngayon, ito yung generation na kung ano yung gusto mong gawin, pwede na. It's yung realistic na yung goals mo. If you want to work sa radio, sa TV, or sa podcasting, or sa social media, magiging content creator ka, pwede na. 'Di ba? Pagkakakitaan na siya ng pera. Kaya lang, parang business din yan. Kailangan mo rin mamuhunan.
Yes, definitely. Well, picking up from what Sir Stanley have said, siguro yung 2 points na nakita ko doon is selling yourself, diba? Ako, I graduated as a marketing graduate. So I really did not went into the corporate world like what others would do. So I did freelance work. So parang yun, branding is very important. So si Mish, she has her own branding, what she talked about in her podcast. Ganon din kay Sir Stanley. For Sir Zahn, do you have a podcast? I'm not so sure about it. But
No, takot pa ako mag-podcast because because I'm like Stanley mentioned, kasi napakarami na ng mga podcast today eh. So it's the challenge is to be able to stand out and to be relevant eh. Kasi parang sayang naman kung either walang nakikinig or it's nice kung may konting nakikinig, and as long as you're passionate about what you want to talk about. But like na-mention nga ni Stanley, I didn't want to start a podcast na because coming from my background in radio, well, we tend to talk about, when I was still DJing, we would talk about current events, things that are relatable to people, and more often than not, current events yon, or pop culture, pop news, entertainment, anything that's entertainment, headlines. But since the news already does that, if you're going to do a podcast and just do the same thing, parang
redundant.
Why bother? Why would people? Yeah, redundant. Why would people want to listen? And I have to say I've thought about starting a podcast, especially because of last year when we spent and still are spending so much time at home. But I didn't want to get into it just because everyone else is doing it. Like I wanted. Just listening to Stan and Stanley's and Mish's stories about starting a podcast or being in a podcast, I want to have that kind of fire, so to speak, to want to want to do it. And I guess I'm still looking, so to speak, still looking for, I don't know, the right topic or the right jumping point, so to speak. But it's something I would like to try.
Yes, and maybe some of our attendees for
and
today,
commit to.
yes, would also love to enter to that. But coming from being relatable, we know that your voice can also be of influence to other people. So maybe this question is for Stan and Zahn as well. You guys are currently the voices behind ETC and Cinema One, respectively. So what do you think is the importance of doing voiceover work in your respective networks? Maybe Stan, you want to go first?
Well, important siya for branding, you know. If I'm gonna be honest about myself, important siya because it looks good on my portfolio. Na, you know, a network trusts me to be their voice, right? It's good for the bank account kasi may regular na sweldo, you know. The older generation, like my parents, for example, kung hindi pa sila believer in voiceover as a career, the fact na may regular sweldo akong pumapasok from a network because I'm their continuity announcer, I would like to think that that's a testament na, you know, you can go somewhere in this career path. So I guess that's one way of putting it.
How about you, Zahn? You want to add anything into that?
Yeah, similar to what Stan just mentioned, that voiceover is a big part of the branding of a channel or a platform, and it's something very that becomes very identifiable. Just like the legendary Mr. Peter Musngi, who's been the voice forever of ABS-CBN, and is one of my personal idols as well. But I like to go back to the reason we even have voiceovers for channels is part of what I would tell my students back, because a little over 10 years ago, I taught a course in Introduction to Sound Design in Benilde, and it was our platform for telling students or introducing students to the importance of sound, of audio it was part of the multimedia arts curriculum. And people like to we like to brag that, me and my fellow professors back then, we like to brag that the sound is 50% of what you're supposed to get with a movie or a TV show or any sort of video production. I mean, it's nice to just have all these graphics, this fancy editing, this fancy lighting, this great directing, this great editing, this great acting, but if people can't hear what's going on their screen, then it all becomes useless. Or if it's half baked, meaning the audio's bad, it was recorded improperly, or it was not mixed properly, it turns into a distraction. And the thing about sound is that it's not supposed to be distracting. If it's I don't like to think of it as it's not necessarily half the picture. It's supposed to complement and complete. So voiceovers complete the presentation of, oh, here's what we have coming next. And it's like having a friend next to you telling you, oh, look at this. This is what we're showing this month. This is what's coming next. Oh, it's October. It's time to scare you with all these Halloween themed movies and stuff like that. So aside from branding, it helps drive the video component of what people see on the screen.
Yes, kumbaga very holistic, no? It's not just the video
Exactly.
itself, not just the marketing campaigns that they do. It should be like a whole package. And maybe I'm just a little curious. Was there a time people you have encountered said, kaboses mo yung nasa ganito? Was there a time for both of you, for Stan and
Yes,
Suzanne?
yes, I have encountered people who said, aren't you that person? Aren't you the guy in this commercial? Aren't you the voice of Cinema One? Or if I introduce myself, like Stan mentioned, it's great to put on the resume. It's a great aside from the regular steady income, because which we'll get into. I'd like to get into more a little later on, as compared to freelance jobs in voice acting. When I tell them that I'm the voice of Cinema One, I always get, ikaw pala yun. Oo nga. Then so it's always an amusing moment for them to be able to connect the voice to a face, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totoo yan, no? Kasi sometimes kasi you'll be amazed that sometimes when I talk to people or to voiceover artists, when they speak the normal speaking voice, kind of different from their voice when they do their VOs. But yeah, siguro may similarities din and magugulat ka, no? Parang, shucks, nagkamukha na yung boses. Yes. But this time around for Stanley and Mish naman, talking about podcasting, how do you guys conceptualize? Kumbaga, especially for you, Mish, no? Kasi you started last year when things around us are so overwhelming, di ba? Ang daming nangyayari. Paano ka nagkaroon ng drive to really, this is the moment na matagal ko nang inantay to really get started. So how do you guys conceptualize? And especially with topics, hindi ba kayo nauubusan ng topics na pag-uusapan? Anybody can go first, Mish?
Yeah, maybe I can take that first. It's a bit different for me because before I started my own podcast, I started a podcast for the network first, right? So we started Rise Up with Genina first. So we were planning for that show. We were starting to conceptualize, what are the stories that people need to hear, especially in this pandemic. That's why we called it Rise Up. It's basically, to encourage people, to inspire people, and to see, the stories of other people where they experience something, I guess, bad, something challenging along their lives, and then how did they get out of it. So that was the first time I experienced handling a podcast. It wasn't really my own. And then after a while, I got into thinking, it's nice to talk about these topics. And it's just so funny because I had, I guess, interns and also people who were working with me in the podcast. Whenever we have meetings to conceptualize for that podcast, we end up it ends up becoming a session, a college session or a college one-on-one with them, where they always ask me, we're still in college, online schooling is hard, what are your tips about college, how did you go through adulting and all those things. And that's where it started, that we turned those one-on-one conversations to actual topics in the podcast, and they encouraged me to start my own and just to share what I have to say out there, specifically on the adulting and the career front, because like I said earlier, those are really the two topics. Like if you have me in a conversation, with or without recording, I can keep going on and just keep talking about it without, I guess, having a hard time thinking what else can I add into that topic. So I think for me, I just got lucky into conceptualizing the podcast per se, like my own podcast, because I really put a lot of, I guess, effort into it. And I'm sure everyone here also does the same thing, right? I try to think of arts that are a misconception or misleading arts to match the episode in itself. I try to think other
what other topics would relate to people. Because I just coming off from what we discussed earlier, podcasting is not really easy. It looks easy. And that's one realization I had as a new podcaster, that, when you listen to other people, it sounds easy. Like they just record and it just, publish that. But it's not like that. There's a lot of things that happens at the back end that you don't see. Thinking about the topics, contacting the guests, coordinating with the guests, being able to record this, making sure everything goes well, editing it, publishing it, and there's just so much. And I will pass it on to Stanley in case he has, he could share also his side.
Siyempre, after recording the podcast and publishing it, you have to promote it. Diba? Kailangan yung topics mo, when you think of topics, dapat relatable sa mga listeners mo. Sino ba yung target market ng podcast mo? Sino ba yung gusto mong itap na market dito? Yun yung isipin ninyo. I can only talk about yung sa akin, yung sa podcast ko, kasi hindi ko alam kung ano yung mga paano nila ginagawa yung sa kanila. Alam ko yung kay Stan, yung wrestling podcast, yung mga fans ng wrestling. Yun yung market niya. Yung mga nakikinig ng radyo, yan sa On Deck. Tapos yung mga Chinoy, yun yung sa Now Steaming. Yun yung ang iniisip ko na target market niya. Yung kay Mish, yung mga college students na nahihirapan sa paano ba mag-aaral pagka final exams na. Ganon. Yung sa akin, mga employees. I myself was an employee before. So kinikwento ko kung ano yung nararanasan ko. And I invite guests na not only to rant or hindi naman magreklamo about their past experiences, kundi i-inspire din, ano yung gagawin mo pagka hindi ka mini-mentor ng boss mo? Ano yung gagawin mo kapag na-insecure sa yung office mate mo? Paano gagawin yan? Araw-araw kayo magkakasama sa office. O ngayon, work from home. Kahit na hindi kayo magkasama sa office, may GC kayo. Na, di ba? And then, tama ba na magpaparinig ka na hindi ka masaya sa company pinapasukan mo, ilalagay mo sa Facebook, tama ba yan o hindi? Tapos, nung kinonceptualize ko yung podcast ko, inisip ko, eto, tinuturo ko sa iba na gusto mag-podcast. Kung mag-iisip ka ng title ng podcast mo, huwag mong gagamitin yung pangalan mo. Tapos gagawin mong, halimbawa, example lang, huwag mong gawing The Mary Grace School Show or The Mary Grace School Podcast. Maging creative ka naman. Maging maging relatable naman. Kasi kung hindi kita kilala...
very creative.
Kasi nailagay niya yung pangalan niya, di ba? I used that before. Meron akong column sa FHM. Ang title ng column ko, One Night Stand. Yun bumagay sa bumagay sa FHM. Pero hindi ako gagawa ng stand.
Uy, naalala ko yun, ha? Nabasa ko yun, ha?
Thank you, sir.
Sino kaya to?
pero hindi ako gagawa ng Stanley Chi podcast kasi iisipin ng tao, sino tong hayop na to? Ba't ako makikinig sa kanya?
Unless sobrang sikat ka na ang taas na ng name value mo, di ba? Kasi kung may name value ka na kaya mong hatakin yung show just based on your name, di pwede, di ba? Kung kunwari, sino ba? Si James Reid, di ba? The James Reid podcast, yun, boom, bebenta yun, di ba?
Bro, si Boy Abunda nga, hindi pinangalanan yung podcast niya sa pangalan niya, di ba?
That's true.
So iisipin mo rin, di ba? So kung hindi ka fan, halimbawa, hindi ka fan ni Boy Abunda, pag narinig mo yung Boy Abunda podcast, hindi ka na makikinig. Pero if you make it creative enough, paghirapan nyo naman yung title ng ng podcast ninyo. Na maging relatable siya na, uy, pag narinig ko yan, wrestling, uy, alam kong tungkol wrestling yan, makikinig ako. Tapos, ayun, yun lang pinapayo ko. Huwag nyo gamitin yung pangalan ninyo. Kasi,
sino ba yan? Pangalanan na natin yan.
Hindi, huwag naman masyadong, kunyari si Michael Jackson naggawa ng podcast, kunyari buhay pa siya.
Wawa naman yung patay pa yung pinuntiryo mo.
In example ko lang, ganun.
safe
kunyari di mo siya kilala, hindi ka na makikinig, di ba? So, yun, sana be more creative when thinking of a title of your podcast. Not only is it parang trabahong tamad pag pinangalanan mo sa sarili mo yung podcast mo. Trabahong tamad na napaka self-centered pa.
Mm-hmm.
Di ba?
Ako siguro, I wanted to ask some... Bumenta yun kay Stan, ha? Oo.
Stan, okay lang. Stan, okay lang. Tumawa ka, okay lang. Ano naman to?
Nakamute.
Wala namang masama na, Kasi napaka self-centered, papangalanan mo using your own name, di ba? Si Mish natatawa rin. Parang may naalala ka, Mish.
Wala.
O, di ba?
Wala akong naalala. Grabe ka.
O, di ba? O.
Maybe I can ask a question, no? I mean, coming from, kasi yung mga attendees natin, medyo quiet sila today. Maybe
Oo
if you
nga.
guys have any questions, feel free to send in, okay? Ako siguro yung magtatanong on their behalf, no? What were the challenges that you guys have encountered throughout this duration na pumapasok kayo sa radio, sa voiceover, and sa podcast? And before we go to your advices para sa kanila, let's go to your challenges. Kasi I think dun sa paghihirap na pinagdaanan nyo, from there, we can pick up maybe some advice, or maybe how you guys were able to handle those hardships. Anyone can go first.
Okay, I'll start na lang.
Okay, Stan.
Yun, tama si Stanley, COVID. Pero siguro, based on personal experience ko, I wouldn't say na struggle siya per se, kasi fortunate ako eh. Galing akong savior. So, it means na my parents could afford to send me to a school like that. Tapos, nakapag-UP ako, and I was driving to and from school. So again, it means na I kind of came from means. Not saying na ka-level ko sina Henry C, hindi ko nga sila kapamilya eh. But to get into a career like this, I'm going to be real and say na it also means na comfortable enough ka na you can afford to take the risk of being in a career like this. Kasi medyo volatile siya eh, medyo unstable siya eh. To get to, kunwari, Sir Zahn and where he is right now, so many good breaks have to go your way. He mentioned it. He knew someone who happened to know him, right? Things have to go your way. Ako rin, ganun din ako. Swerte din ako na, I knew the right people. I was put in a position where I could succeed. But if I were in a position na we were living paycheck to paycheck and I needed to work to put food on the table ngayon na I can't afford to spend time in this Zoom webinar, wala, I can't be here. I will not be where I am. So, doon ako magsisimula. Kasi it's so idealistic and unfair to say na you have a dream, go for it. Go pursue your dream. Frankly, it's unrealistic. Especially given current circumstances with the pandemic. So, doon ako magsisimula. But when I got there, it was really opening my ears and listening to people, finding mentors. Very important yun eh.
Mentors?
Finding mentors who will be constructive with their feedback, who will be very supportive, and then learning to ask for opportunities or learning to seek them out. Kasi ako, yung career mantra ko is if you never ask, the answer will always be no. So going back to yung origin story ng podcast ko, pumasok lang ako dun sa production booth ng radio station, tapos nag-record kami. And then after that, nagpaalam ako dun sa owner. Sabi ko, boss, pwede ba ako mag-record ng podcast? Hindi niya alam kung ano yung podcast, in-explain ko pa. Tapos sabi ko, baka wala kaming kitain, pero if ever suntok sa buwan, may advertising revenue kami, hahatian kita. Siguro mga 500 lang ina-expect or whatever. Eh syempre, may-ari ka ng radio station, di ba? Mayaman ka, hindi na kailangan, barya lang sa kanya eh. Sabi niya, sige, okay lang, you can produce. Hindi mo kailangan magbayad ng internet, ng kuryente, whatever. Hindi kailangan. Basta, whatever skills you pick up, magagamit ko yan sa radio station. Maririp ko yan. He was right. He had the foresight to see that. So, nag-pay off naman. But it started with me asking. And then that podcast led to a TV show. Why? Because I pitched it to Fox Philippines, who was broadcasting WWE at the time. So again, if you never ask, the answer will always be no. Yun. Yung dalawa ang parang gusto kong i-point out in terms of the struggle.
I think my take for that idea is to put yourself out there kasi they won't really know what you can do and what skills you have until you have this opportunity para ipakita sa kanila. Alam mo yun? Parang if you are confident enough na kaya mo naman, why not, di ba? Kasi like even can I just add, no? I myself, if I see, for instance, there is this mall that is being built near our home. So I said, nako, pag may bagong mall, may opening yan. So kailangan nila ng host, di ba? So I submitted my portfolio and then eventually from there, they got me as their host. Ganun lang. So wait lang, balik sa inyo. Chumika talaga ako, no? So who wanted to add after Stan about the challenges or struggles that you have encountered along the way?
Okay, yung challenges. Oh, sige, Sir Zahn. Okay.
No, it's okay. Okay, just wanted to add that similar to what Stan mentioned, I've been privileged that the doors opened up, or one good thing leads to another, but that doesn't mean it's all up, everything's going up that everything was just good all the way. I had my share of challenges. There have been lean months, lean years na parang ang hina ng mga pumupunta sa akin because voiceover is a very picking out a particular voice for a particular project is a very subjective matter, meaning it goes from someone doing the casting. Na okay, let's get a pool of people. Na okay, siguro voice sounds 30 to 35 years old, male, siguro young father, mga ganon. Okay, so auditions come in. So and it doesn't end with the casting director. The casting director then presents it to a producer. Then the producer okay, they do a short list. Okay, out of 100, they pick 10. And then that 10 then gets presented to the client who goes, wala akong gusto dyan. Oh. So it can be, find other people, find another set of people. Or baka ito. Okay, out of those, maybe one or two. Can they do another audition, another round of auditions? So it is, quite frankly, up until today, it is very, very volatile for those who are thinking of getting into just voice acting. That's why I would be one of the first to tell you, don't go into it all in, meaning get some education, find out more about the business aspect. I mean, if you are privileged enough to not need the money and then you just want to try it, good for you. But unfortunately, not everyone is that lucky. And I've been fortunate that all the time that I've been a voice actor, I've also had a steady job. I had regular income that for most of the time that I've spent being all the years I've been a voice actor, I've also been a radio host. And then the regular income came from being the voice of a channel of in this case Cinema One, which is oddly enough is the longest. Although I'm not technically an employee, this is the longest. The company that runs Cinema One, that produces Cinema One, is the employer of biggest blessings. So having that regular income has allowed me to, given me some room to keep looking for the opportunities that voice acting presents, because it's technically still freelance. And quite frankly, if I may be honest, dati kasi, when I started out in voice acting or being a voiceover, you simply had to show up. You get a call from a producer or a colleague refers you. Oh, you call this number, may naghahanap. Call the producer. Bukas or in a couple of days yung recording. So you make a schedule and you simply show up. Pupunta ka sa studio, that's it. Nowadays, if you're thinking of being a voice actor, you have to learn how to be an amateur sound engineer, an audio engineer. You have to learn about equipment, and then you have to build your own studio inside. Yes. You have to think about building your own studio in your own house, because most of the recording studios, since last year, do not accept people because they don't want to end up with sick employees because of the pandemic. And quite frankly, from my experience, if I may just add, I actually got to a low point wondering if I should keep doing this. And that's why I'm thankful for organizations and the people behind it, such as Voc Alliance, to its founder, Robbie Joseph, who's been like even though he's younger than me, he's sort of been like a dad to he's a dad to a lot of voice actors and aspiring voice actors nowadays, and he's one of the people who helped give me a different perspective, so to speak. Kasi even during the pandemic, even though I invested in, you adapt, you invested in trying to build a little recording setup in your house so you can keep working, but there was a time there were no calls coming in. I was submitting auditions. None of them were being translated into work. So, thanks to the great, also aside from my colleagues, the great support of my wife and my family, they helped me to sort of refocus my outlook to try to be more positive. And I'm not saying, and I'm never going to tell anyone that it's easy. No, it's. I know we all have our personal challenges,
Yes.
which what is going on. But you have to try to be positive, and you have to try to find the opportunities. And that's why I'm in awe. Ako saludo ako sa mga the likes of Stanley, and Mish who host podcasts. Because like I mentioned earlier, I don't even know where to start and what to talk about yet, but I'd like to. And my hats off to them that they found a place for their voices, and you've had the courage, to try. And I think that's something, that's the kind of challenge that we all need to try to find the courage to go on, to do something.
Yes, and siguro, no, looking into the opportunities that comes our way, minsan lang yan dumating eh, no? And if it's there and you know it's the right time for you to grab that opportunity, then I think swertihan na din, I think, yung track na napupuntahan natin. And we're just so thankful about the people that we work with, the relationship na nabibuild natin. And Mish or Sir Stanley, do you want to add into the challenges before I pick up this question from our audience?
Sometimes it's not all about the money. Minsan mali, alam naman natin when you work sa ganito, hindi ganun kalaki yung bayad sa umpisa. Pero diyan papasok yung multiple streams of income. Now, kagaya ng sinasabi nila Sir Zahn na meron siyang day job while doing the voice of sa Cinema One. Kami, meron din kami mga day job. Apart from hosting our podcast, kahit na nasa radio, may mga racket din kami. Multiple streams of income para pag nawala yung isa dyan, meron ka pa rin makukuhanan ng pera. And eto, para mas madali, you have to work hard para masuportahan mo yung things that you're passionate about. Like for sa amin nila Stan, nila Mish, nila Sir Zahn, yung sa voice, yung sa boses namin, pinagkakakitaan namin, or yung podcasting, para masuportahan namin yung passion namin. Tatandaan ninyo, if you want to have your own podcast, importante, you have to be consistent. Kasi hindi naman pwedeng after 10 episodes or after 13 episodes, ayaw mo na mag-podcast, ayaw mo na mag-isip ng topic, nahihirapan ka na mag-invite ng guest. So, consistency, you have to be passionate about the topics that you're talking about, kung ano man yung concept ng show mo. And syempre, yung pangatlo is kailangan yung swerte. Kung wala ka nun kahit ano gawin mo you're passionate about it, consistent ka. Kung hindi ka sinwerte, wala rin Minsan, hard work, importante yan. Para pag dumating yung opportunity sa inyo, tinawag ka, uy, kailangan namin ng ganito. Hindi ready ka kagad. Like yung kay MG, may nagtayo ng bagong mall sa Chinatown, nag-apply siya. Nung tinawagan siya, ready siya na mag-host ng events, di ba? So, ganun lang yun.
Yeah. Yes, actually yung to prepare yourself to kung saan ka papasok sometimes we know naman na hindi mo talaga magiging you'll never be prepared to what's going to happen because everything is new to you, especially kapag bago ka sa papasukin mo, but preparation I believe is also the key. And tulad sabi ni Sir Stanley, consistency, that's very very important as well. Kasi especially, example, you do vlogs. For vlogging, we'll talk about that on the third session or the third leg of our event. Especially when you do vlogs as well, hindi pwedeng isang vlog lang kasi people will follow at tuloy-tuloy yung dadami at they will look forward to your content. How about you, Mish? Ikaw, bilang you started podcasting just last year, what are the challenges? Maybe you can share with us quickly.
For me, I'm coming from a different perspective also because I do largely, I do focus largely on my day job, diba? Podcasting is really a passion project for me, meaning I don't earn from it now, diba? Alam mo yun, it's something that, like what Stanley said earlier, you don't earn from it at the start. It's something that you need to, build up. It's something that you need to be sure about and keep doing in terms of the consistency. And because that we have our day job to fund our passion, you have to start thinking like, what is it in it for me to keep doing what I'm doing for this passion project to work, right? Kasi nga, kung let's just say you're in that position where you don't earn money from it, and ikaw pa yung naglalabas ng pera para masustentuhan yung passion mo, 'di ba? Parang it will come to a point na parang bakit ko pa to ginagawa? 'Di ba? And
Purpose.
Exactly. That's why you should know your purpose and the why, I guess, and why you started it, right? Kasi ultimately when you reach that perspective or you reach that point where you start asking yourself, you have to look back on what your anchor was at that time. Now, I started this because I wanted to, I guess, help other people. I started this because I feel like what I have to say means something to other people who's going to listen. All those things. And for me, I guess in terms of the challenge, really is I postponed starting my own podcast to the point I started working on other podcasts before mine because I don't think I had what it takes to start my own podcast. I've said this before. I don't like my voice. I'm not sure if I've shared this to either of our panelists, but I don't like my voice. I cringe actually when I listen to my own voice. It took a while really to get me to adjust to listening to myself, and especially sa podcasting, when you record, you have to listen to it multiple times, not just once, but then multiple times, because you're gonna edit. And I had to get over that for me to keep doing this. So I guess that's one of the challenges I had.
Okay. Nako, ang dami, no? I think we can go on with the discussion, but I think it's already 5:17 on the clock. So let me just pick up this question before I go to the wrap-up question. I wanted to ask, hear from Jack, what are the equipment you recommend we start with? Maybe anybody of you can just give a quick maybe rundown of the things that we need to have?
Yeah, siguro it helps to know what space you're operating with. Like, what's your room like? Treated ba yung space mo? Soundproof ba siya? That's a good place to start. In my case kasi, when I started podcasting, I was doing it sa studio nung radio station. This is like 2014, di ba? And then when the pandemic happened, I already invested in some gear. So I had some mics to play around with dito sa bahay. So I have a USB mic, which I'm talking to right now. Di lang makita kasi natatakpan nung virtual background. But it's a USB mic. So madali lang siyang gamitin kasi I just have to plug it into my laptop and then I can record already. It really depends on your space and on your budget. So hindi siya yung parang catch-all na pwede kong i-recommend agad. If you go deeper pa into voiceover, this is something I learned recently from Vocalliance, the group that Sir Zahn mentioned. Certain mics are also better suited for certain voices. So I didn't know that until recently. So kailangan mahanap mo rin yung mic na hiyang sa boses mo. So kailangan mo rin consider yun.
Yes. Thank you for that, Stan. Siguro kumbaga investment na din, no? Yung sabi nga ni Mish, ikaw yung mamumuhunan, especially in the first few maybe months or years of doing this kasi kailangan mo talagang isimulan. If not, then you won't reach to the point yet you wanted to reach, diba? So, yes, I think that's it for this part of the second discussion about influence. Siguro, at this time, we can do a little wrap up for our guests. And actually, dito, no, sabi nila, Ma'am Mish, can you walk us through the process of creating, recording, editing, uploading? Ang daming tanong. Maybe it's another session, no, para sa atin. But yes, to wrap it up, maybe you guys I'll give time for you guys to say what you want to say to everybody who wants to get started with podcasting or maybe doing VO projects or doing radio. Ano yung maging advice niyo para sa kanila and key takeaways for everybody? Maybe I can go for Sir Zahn. Do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Mary Grace. Actually, there was a question here from
Yes.
Tanya specifically to me. How do we know where our voice fits in? That's a good question. And since Mish mentioned that she cringes at her own voice, I think I believe I've read a couple of articles already about that. Parang by human nature, we don't. By nature, rather, by nature, we cringe at the sound of our own voices. Na parang, like the first time I heard my recorded voice back when I was starting out in radio, and they asked me to do a commercial, or the first time I heard it inside the headphones when I got on air, and I was so nervous, sweating buckets and everything. I was going like, wow, is that really what I sound like? And I mean, and I don't mean that in a good way. So you have to kind of learn what you have and what you're working with. Now, as far as Tanya's Tanya's question is where a voice fits in. I think it depends on what do you want to do with it. I mean, if you want to do podcasting, there is anybody can do it. I like to think of podcasting and the technology that allows for it nowadays is that it's like having a digital form of a version of a megaphone.
Mm.
So now you have this digital megaphone. Now it's simply up to you. What do you want to do with it? And my advice is just please be responsible with it. I mean, back in the day, you had to be hired by a radio station to be able to have the platform to speak to an audience through the radio, or you had to be hired by a TV a network to be on TV to say what you want, or you had to be hired by a newspaper to write an article and pour out your thoughts or talk about what's going on in the world. But nowadays, you can get on Facebook, you can pour your heart out, pour all your emotions out, talk about what you're passionate about, pour out all your thoughts. But then the problem is when there are people in this day and age, when we have all this disinformation, this fake news, it turns into just so much digital noise, and it can be very challenging, nerve-wracking, and emotionally draining to just try to filter out and weed, to the point that I have colleagues, who start having anxiety attacks that they say, they say in our group chat, "Ay, sorry, 2 days na akong di tumitingin sa phone ko kasi nakaka-stress yung balita." Especially because of the situation with COVID. So all I would ask is that if you do decide to either be a podcaster, get into radio, and even in this day and age, there's no such thing as what they used to call people who sound like me, the so-called radio voice. There's no such thing. Anybody can be on the radio now. Anybody can start doing a podcast as long as you know what you're doing. You take the time to research what you'd like to do, what it requires, and in this, we've already mentioned, it requires a bit of investment. It requires some equipment, learning how to use that equipment, educating yourself with the right way, maybe it's not right or wrong, but the best way to present a podcast or to present a radio show. Or if you'd like to get into voice acting, we try to emphasize, especially with our colleagues in Vocal Alliance, that voice acting is also acting. So you have to kind of start with things like maybe take an acting class, or maybe take a musical or singing class to help find out the range of what you can do with your voice. But ultimately, all I would personally ask for our attendees is try to think about what you're going to do with your voice, because if you get to a place where enough people are listening to you, I believe you need to be responsible for what you say and what you do.
Mm-hmm, because that's a big
Sorry if
influence
that's too serious.
and impact in their lives. Tama ba?
Mhm.
Kasi sometimes people will refer to, narinig ko sa podcast ni ganito, ganyan. So they will basically refer to what we have.
Uso na yan, di ba? Nabasa ko sa internet, narinig ko sa podcast, na ito yung sabi, na hindi na hindi pala effective yung vaccine, mga ganon, di ba?
Okay, can I just add into that? Vaccine works for me. I mean, in my perspective. So to everybody, if you are watching and you're thinking about it, maybe you can do a little research, because I've known a lot of people who contacted the virus or had COVID, but then they were vaccinated. So it so happened na lesson din yung impact ng COVID sa kanila. So just adding into that, going back to their advices to everybody who want to go next. I think si Sir Stanley, dahil naka-unmute na siya.
If you want to start your own podcast, be careful din kung sino ini-invite yung guest. Diba? Kasi mamaya mag-guest ka ng politiko tapos hindi totoo yung sasabihin sa platform mo. Diba nakakahiya naman? Mako-call out ka ng mga tao na, ba't mo in-interview si ganito, si ganyan? Ganito ginawa niya dati nung martial law . Diba?
Sabi ko na
So,
yun yata
be careful din, di
parang
ba?
alam ko yata yung kung sino pinag-usap.
You have to be
Pinag-usapan natin.
careful din. You have to be
ni
careful
Stanley.
kung sino yung mga giniguest ninyo. I know that
Exactly.
we invite mga experts sa mga shows natin. Pero kailangan make sure na hindi fake news yung ikakalat niya. Yung
Make sure hindi expert sa pagnanakaw or
yes,
sa
oo, di
murder.
ba?
Yung mga ganun.
Kasi, di ba? Andyan na tayo, binayaran siya, pero binayaran ka siguro dahil nag-guest. Pero sana maging naman kayo, maging fair naman kayo. Hindi naman yung porket close kayo, in-invite mo sa wedding or di ba? Kakampihan mo na tapos parang pass is pass. Hindi ganun yon, di ba? So be careful kung sino yung i-invite ninyong expert man yan, kaibigan nyo man yan, or kung sino man ang o kung anumang topic ang pag-uusapan ninyo. Be sensitive to the listeners, to you have to empathize din sa mga listeners ninyo.
Picking up from that, can I just ask, have you guys experienced being bashed because of what you have done on radio or podcast?
Yeah, I have. So I've been bashed on radio sa show ni Mo Twister. This was when I was relatively new in radio. I was pretty young, and I just tweeted something that in retrospect was pretty insensitive. And I didn't know it at the time because I was just a very angry college student, who would use Twitter to vent. So I just tweeted out something, and then si Showbiz Bro or Makoy Pare from Machong Chismisan, who's now a good friend of mine, nahagilap niya and then ginamit niya sa segment nila ni Mo Twister. And then they bashed me on air. And I had an anxiety attack that lasted like 2 days. And then dinelete ko siya agad. And then after that, sabi ko, mali ba yung ginawa ko? Mali ba yung sinabi ko? And in retrospect, mali nga ako nun. Tama ba na binash nila ako? Hindi rin. But the takeaway here is receipts are there. They're online. Whatever you say. Lalo na ngayon sa medium na to, magpa-podcast ka, or gusto mo maging host, or gusto mo maging content creator. Everything is on the internet, and these are receipts, right? These can be dug up and used against you anytime. So to take off from yung sinabi ni Sir Zahn at ni Stanley about knowing the weight of the responsibility you carry, totoo yun eh. There's a reason why Tony Gonzaga is getting all this flack kasi 4 million plus followers. That is no joke. So if you're going to use your platform to be an apologist for something that's unequivocally wrong, you have to take accountability for that. So what more tayo na mas maliliit yung mga reach natin, mas maliliit yung mga communities that we are fostering with our content. We have to really use our voices responsibly. On a more personal note, I think this was touched on earlier. Itong someone said it in the comments, business pa rin to. If you want to pursue this talaga professionally, you have to remember it's a business, and it starts with treating yourself fairly. Sabi ni Stanley kanina na you might start na mababa ang sweldo, and nasa sayo yan kung gusto mo tanggapin. Pero sana naman, wag kang papayag na palagi nilang mababa ang sweldo mo. Kasi, hindi, swerte na nga ako na I got this eh. I'm going to quote, or I'm going to paraphrase something na si Robbie Joseph of Vocal Alliance advised me, because I also consider him a mentor. Wag kang magiging bottom feeder. Kasi kapag bottom feeder ka, talagang mananatili ka dyan sa baba. You have to know your worth. Know na yung work mo, may value yan, may halaga yan. The reason why you get paid is not just for yung 1 hour that you spent in the booth. You get paid for the work that you put in to get to the point where you get to spend that 1 hour in a booth as a voice talent, or that I get to, Sir Zahn and myself get to record as continuity announcers. Like, you didn't just wake up one day and become a Zahn you know? So, yung work na yan, may halaga yan. And you have to know your worth. Wag kang papayag na lagi kang ilolowball, because you will stay at the bottom talaga.
Slow clap. That's true. Totoo yan. Even in the field of hosting, di ba? Actually, kapag pumayag ka na, ilowball ka nila, then you are affecting other people as well. They will say, bakit yung isa ganito, pumayag sa ganito? Di ba? So, you guys...
Bakit si Mary Grace?
But si Mary Grace pumayag, ampaw lang.
Merienda lang yung PF.
Ganyan. But si Miss pumayag, pinadalhan lang namin ng pizza, umokay na.
Masaya na ako.
Sumali na sa event.
But maybe it differs, no? In different situations, you have to look into it, right and left. And maybe in my state right now, I know how to balance it, especially when people would invite us to go out for work. The risk that you take versus the compensation that you get. What if na lang, diba? Something happened. Would that be enough for you to cover whatever will happen in the next coming days? So yun. And we have here a question. I think some of our attendees here today would really want to go into this one. Like here, who do we go to if we want to pitch a podcast? Can we join Chinoy Podcast Network? I think Mish, this is for you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that question. I also saw one here actually. Just to connect to that, do we have to have a huge following before creating a podcast? And I would like to connect to that question. I used to think so, but I don't have a lot of following. I actually don't like to even show my face. I actually received a message just now for one of the attendees. It's my first time to see your face because I don't show my face in a podcast as much as possible. I just really want people to listen to the content or what I really have to say or what I have to put out there. And so to answer the question, I used to think that I need to have a strong following, but it's not, at least for podcasting. It's really the content that you put out there. And if you really have that, this connects to the question on the pitching. If you really have that, if you're passionate about a certain idea, if you really think that this idea is something you want to talk about, then of course we are more than happy, for Chinoy Podcast Network at that to listen to that pitch and to see, if it's something that really can work together and publish that podcast for you. So that's to answer the question. You can actually email us at Chinoy Podcast Network at chinoy.tv. Should you want to reach out to us or just message Chinoy TV's Instagram, that also works equally. I just also want to add just on, other learnings and tips to everyone here. One thing I also realized, going into podcasting, apart from, the know your worth, be responsible for what you put out there. You have people who follow you, who would quote you. You also meet a lot of friends here in the podcasting community. That's one thing I find super endearing and I'm really happy about. I never knew Stanley and Stan before this podcasting. I met Stan C before in some event for Chinoy TV, but being friends with them, being able to be friends with other podcasters, it's really through this medium that I was able to connect with them. When I guest them in my show or they guest me on their show and then we started talking about certain things, that's where you build that friendship. And that's one thing that's not really, publicly promoted in podcasting. There's the community here in the Philippines, especially that, it's still starting. We admit it's still small, but there's definitely a lot of potential. That's my take on it.
Oh, that's really nice to know. And I think yung community is very helpful then with each other. And actually, I myself na-feel ko na in this pandemic or for 2021, nag-boom ang podcasting. The celebrities would come from TV to their shows to concerts. Now they're doing vlogging and podcasting. So I think you guys should also get started with your podcast kapag na-feel nyo, this is the sign na hinahanap ninyo. But do we have any more questions to pick up? I think it's already 5:34 and we don't want to take so much time of our speakers as well. But again, to Sir Zahn, to Stan, Sir Stanley, and Mish, thank you so much for taking this time to be with us this afternoon as well. And for sure, everybody have enjoyed the discussion we have. I know there are still some questions na hindi pa natin na-tackle, but maybe we have an opportunity for the leg 3. So before I let you guys go, can I request for a group photo? Ako na mag-screenshot. Okay.
Sige. Dadagdag ko lang sa mga gustong magkaroon ng podcast. May dadagdag lang ako. Alam ko naman na lahat tayo, hindi kasing ganda yung boses natin kagaya kay Zahn at kay Stan. Pero pag may podcast ka, hindi man maganda yung boses natin kumanta kagaya kay Mary Grace, pero at least yung boses mo nasa Spotify pag may podcast ka. Pwede mo sabihin yun sa mga parents mo.
Before we end, I'm actually curious. How do you explain to other people who's not familiar with podcasting what podcasting is?
Parang radyo pero walang kantahan.
Diba? Kasi how you explain it to parents, diba? Like when I was gonna start this, parang my parents were like, ano podcasting? But how do you explain that? But yeah, I always just say, parang siyang radio.
Parang
it's a talk show on your cell phone.
Yes, or sa mga mas senior, parang nagchichismisan lang, nakikinig ka lang sa chismisan nila.
Ako for for me, I see podcast as what I can do as multitasker. Parang, kasi pag vlog, di ba, you have to watch the video. So pag podcast, maybe you can clean the house, do
Tama yun,
something
yeah.
while having
Tama.
it played
That's
on
how
the
I got
background.
into it.
So
Yeah.
parang radyo. Oh, parang radyo.
Yes. Parang radyo. Instead of talking to your neighbors, yung mga marites dyan. Yung mga marites dyan, mga nakikita. Makinig kayo ng podcast. It's educational. May inform kayo, may entertain pa kayo.
Inspirational as well.
Yes. Oo.
Okay, we're good with that. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of virtual applause to our speakers for today. We have Stanley, Mr. Zahn, Mr. Stanley Chi, and Michelle Tan. Woo-hoo! Thank you guys for lending your time and your voice, your talent, and your knowledge with all our attendees for today. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time for joining us for the second part of Power of Our Voice, making a choice on the road less traveled. And of course, we would like to once again give a shout out to our sponsors for making this event possible. This series is presented by Chinoy Podcast Network and Chinoy TV in partnership with NB Team, Geneto PH, Canva, Fruits and Bloom. We also have Alliance of Filipino Chinese Students, Ateneo Celadon, Del Sol University Management of Financial Institution Association, Rotary Club of Chinatown, Manila, St. Jude Catholic School, Student Council. We also have University of Santo Tomas Scarlett Central, University of Santo Tomas Scarlett Accountancy. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, this has been your host for today and moderator also for today. My name is Mary Grace. We'll see you on the third leg of our event. Thank you so much and stay safe always. Bye.
Hey there, welcome to Rise Up with Genina Chan. I'm Genina, host and content creator, always curious to learn more from life. This podcast is one for the mind, heart, body, and soul as we share stories from real lives that draw inspiration, provide strength, and empower each other to rise up.
And I realized after that, okay, if politics is a game that leaders play, I need to learn the rules so that one day the people can win.
As soon as your body adapts, as soon as your body builds a system of habits, it'll get much easier. And the days where you don't feel like doing it, it actually becomes automatic. That's one thing that I've learned.
Hi there, I'm Mish, host of Misconceptions, the podcast that talks about the common struggles of modern-day millennials and Gen Zs as we all navigate through college, enter the real world, and build our careers.
Really something that we have to face. And I think that's where growth comes from.
Yes.
If you start, because you start to question yourself and then you start to know yourself more. Diba?
Don't forget to give time for yourself. Kasi that's really the most important thing that you as a person have to.
Ito, I know it's easier said than done, but kailangan natin matutunan how to protect our rest and recovery practices intensely.
Welcome to Daddy Academy, the DIY podcast for dads. This podcast is for longtime dads, working dads, soon-to-be dads, and all the kind of dads who are just eager to hear about each other's stories, learn from each other, and relate to one another.
I think the most memorable struggle that I had was marrying my wife because not the way you think.
Kompletuhin mo yung sentence niya kasi
yes.
So I was literally teacher, nanny,
gayo.
entertainer, everything you can think of. Everything basically what a mom does. Diba? I was mom.